In the previous section, we looked at adding real numbers. Now we're going to flip that around a little bit and we're going to look at subtracting real numbers. The good news is that if you did well with adding real numbers, or if you understood that section well, then this section should go very well for you. It turns out it's pretty much more of the same. So here is our subtraction rule. For real numbers a and b, if we're going to subtract b from a, we can just add the opposite of b to a. Right? So instead of saying a minus b, we can equivalently say a plus the opposite of b. So now you don't even really need to know subtraction. All you need to be able to do is add real numbers, which of course you already know how to do. So as an example, if you want to take 5 minus 8 and maybe you don't really want to do that subtraction, you can just change that to a 5 plus, and then the opposite of 8 being negative 8. Another example here, if we start with 3 and now we subtract a negative number, so 3 minus negative 9, we can change the subtraction to an addition as long as we change the sign here as well. So now instead of a negative 9, it becomes a positive 9. You may have heard before the line, subtracting a negative is just like adding a positive. So 3 minus negative 9 is equivalent to 3 plus 9. Alright, now one place that we can use subtraction is in evaluating change. So for example, we might want to look at the change in some quantity such as temperature would be a common example, or maybe elevation or altitude of an airplane. And the key here, when we're using subtraction, we always want to compare the newer value to the original value. You'll see an example of how this works. So an example here, at 1 a.m. the temperature was 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Then that same day at 6 a.m. the temperature was 40 degrees, again Fahrenheit. What was the change in temperature? So we want to compare the newer value, so the 6 a.m. value of 40 degrees, to the original value, the 1 a.m. value of 50 degrees. And the way that's going to look with subtraction, always subtract the original value from the newer value. So regardless of how the sign turns out, take the original value from the newer value. So our original value is 50. We're going to subtract that from the newer value. So 40 minus 50, which of course we can rewrite as 40 plus negative 50. Now of course, since negative 50 has a greater absolute value than 40, we're going to end up with a negative answer, and then we look at the difference between their absolute values. So 50 minus 40 would give us 10, and again we know that has to be negative. So we end up with a negative 10, and of course the negative value is what tells us that the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Now in this case that's pretty obvious. You already know going from 50 to 40 that it dropped. In some cases it might not be quite so obvious. So follow that rule, subtract the original from the newer value. So we're ready for some examples already. Find the difference. Negative 5 minus 9. So we can rewrite this as negative 5, and then instead of subtracting a positive 9, I'm going to add a negative 9. Okay? And of course we already know that you're starting already to the left of 0, and by adding a negative we go even further to the left. So we're going to combine the absolute values of these two. So we are 5 units away, 9 more units away will take us to 14 units away from 0, and we're in the negative direction. So this is a negative 14. Okay, next example. Find the difference again. Notice difference is the key word here for subtraction. Find the difference, 6 minus negative 8, which we can rewrite as 6 plus, and then instead of a negative 8, simply a positive 8. Now if you want, you can just write in plus positive 8. Some people like to do that. Okay? So 6 plus 8 will give us positive 14. Okay, so notice that subtracting a negative, we actually end up going to the right on the number line. All right, evaluate the expression x minus y minus 8 when x is equal to -3 and y equals -4. And by the way, maybe I should mention now, did you notice that when we were looking at addition, we had properties like the commutative property and the associative property? Notice I didn't mention those for subtraction because they don't work for subtraction. But we can rewrite these as addition, and then those properties will work. So this is going to be equal to, I'm going to go ahead and first of all substitute the values that we know. So x is -3 minus, and then y is -4. And I'm going to put that in parentheses just to help separate out the negative from the subtraction. And then -8. And now I'm going to rewrite this. We have two subtractions going on here. I'm going to rewrite this using just addition. So this is -3 plus, and then instead of a -4, a +4, plus, and then instead of a +8, we're now going to be adding a -8. Okay, so now that we have just addition, you could actually add these in any order that you want. Let's go ahead though and work from left to right. So if we take -3 plus 4, notice we have a negative and a positive. 4 has a greater absolute value than -3, so our answer is going to be positive. How much further from 0 is 4 compared to -3? Well, it's 1 unit further away. If you want to look at it on a number line, we would be starting 3 to the left of 0, going 4 to the right. Well, it takes 3 steps just to get to 0, and then we have that one more step to take, which will get us to -1. And we're still adding that to -8. And now once again we have opposite signs, so positive, negative. Here we have an absolute value of 1, here we have an absolute value of 8. So we're going to end up with a negative answer since -8 has the greater absolute value, and the difference of their absolute values is 7. In other words, -8 is 7 units further away from 0 than 1 is. And of course we end up with a negative. Right, number 4. A plane was flying at 30,000 feet. To avoid a storm, it changed its altitude to 35,000 feet. What is the change in altitude? So remember, we're going to look at the newer value, 35,000. 35,000 feet. Subtract the original value, so minus 30,000 feet. Okay, and of course, notice our units are the same. Thank goodness for that. We don't have to deal with any conversions. So 35,000 minus 30,000. If you want, you can rewrite this. And of course, you've done problems like this enough that you don't really need to in this case so much. But you can think of this as adding a -30,000, and ultimately you end up with an answer of 5,000 feet. And notice, because we kept that convention of taking the newer value minus the original, the sign of our answer tells us this was an increase of 5,000 feet. So good luck with your work in this unit.